And a warm welcome, baseball fans, to the Highland Bullpen Baseball Podcast. We have a packed show for you this week with so much going on in the world of MLB. And let's start as we mean to go on at pace. So we'll start off this week with our usual team roundups. And first of all, to tell us some more recent events for the Chicago White Sox, it's Dave Jr.
Good evening, Richard. Good evening, guys, and everyone who's listening. I'll try and keep it brief because I've got a bit more of a meaty update for all four teams actually after this. But the White Sox, if you remember the first 25 games of the season, we started with a record of 3-22, which, just checking past records, that's not good. The 19 games that followed, though, when you consider a team that started 3-22, the following 19 games, we've been running at 11-8, which is, again, that's getting back on track. 3 games over 500. Having said that, the last 4 games, a bit of a sticky road trip. So we've been away to the Yankees, where we were swept 3-0, and we arrived in Toronto last night and lost the opening game of that series. So again, some pretty tricky games coming up, which culminate in the arrival of Boston, and then a quick trip over to Seattle. But some games coming up against the Orioles, the Blue Jays again, the Brewers, the Cubs, and then Boston and Seattle, which takes us up to the middle of June. So that's the next 3 weeks for the White Sox. Quite a few tricky games, but they're all tricky games in baseball these days, unless you're playing the White Sox, of course. So we're well out of contention. But I wanted to dig a little deeper, and if you don't mind, I'll take up a few minutes running through some stats, which I've done my best to involve all 4 of our clubs, as well as kind of divisional leaders. So having dug under the bonnet a little bit, the offense is really the issue for the White Sox, and the number which is jumping off the page is 30 for the White Sox, 30, and that's not a good thing because we're 30th in so many offensive metrics. Again, I'll try to be quite quick through them. Runs, so all of these metrics are all 30th place, and there's more that I could have put the White Sox in, but these are the ones that stick out to me. Runs per game, 2.83. So again, worse than the league, 30th out of 30. To give you an idea, that 2.83 stacks up against the Phillies in first place at 5.33. Boston are actually the only team above league average from our 4. Sitting in 13th place with around about 4.4 per game. Runs scored, 136. The Dodgers sit with 259. And the really disparaging aspect here is that the White Sox are there at 136. So that's 136. 29th place is 173 with the Blue Jays, who again scored 9 last night on the White Sox. So that might only grow as we go on. Home runs, sitting in 30th against 39 for the Orioles. RBIs, 125 versus exactly double that at 251 for the Dodgers. Walks, last place. I might not draw some other comparisons, but you get an idea. But walks, 30th place. Batting average, 30th. On base, 30th. Slugging, 30th. The problem for the White Sox lies in what we're doing actually offensively. And what I wanted to do was just a slight twist. The best team amongst our 4 was really Boston. Dave can maybe talk more about that at a later date, but the one team that really stood out, I think Tigers have maybe drifted away recently. The Mariners are so-so, but Boston seem to be the best of our collective lot just now. And when it comes to, I picked out 4 other stats just to take it away from the White Sox and finish my little section off. The Mariners are sitting 30th in terms of doubles. So you've only hit 56 this year as opposed to the Twins who have hit 92. And to stay with the Mariners, strikeouts, you are number 1 in being struck out, Richard, unfortunately, with 486. And to show you how that compares, the Astros are top of that particular table on 322. Moving things on to the Tigers. The Tigers have actually, this is a pretty good stat, Alan. You're the number 1 team in MLB for triples. You're up there. You've had 15 this season, and the worst out of all 30 teams are the Mets, who have only managed it once. And in terms of caught stealing, you're in last place, which again is a good thing. offensively. So the Tigers have been caught stealing 3 times this year, as opposed to a team like the Rays who have been caught stealing base 21 times. So there's some good metrics there for the Tigers, maybe some disappointing one for the Mariners. And again, my summary looking through stats, and again, this is purely, it's different watching game, with your own eyes. Boston seem to be the pick of our 4 teams. I'm not sure. Just moving on to perhaps the Tigers, if that's okay, Alan. You cover things off next. But that's my sort of summary. But I thought that was quite interesting with the Tigers. But how have the team been performing recently?
Yeah, I come to you following a losing team, which I think is the first time that I will be saying that on the podcast this season. The Tigers got off to a fast start. I think I mentioned before that that's generally something that they've not been doing. But it was interesting listening to you because the Tiger support is very much, and I know it wasn't really interesting. It's just I'm trying to be polite there, obviously. The Tiger support is very obviously focused on the fact that there is no offensive support there. You've got a situation that I don't have the exact figures to hand, but Reese Olson, who had one of the best ERAs as a starting pitcher in the MLB, was sitting at 0-4. And one of the jokes is that the guys in the team must hate him because he's that good at pitching, but the bats just don't turn out when he plays. You get Tarek Skubal. I think he's actually the opposite. He's 6-0, which is fairly phenomenal stuff for a pitcher for the Tigers, just talking Cy Young awards and what have you. But I think the feeling, and Jack Flaherty, the feeling with Tigers starting pitching is it's pretty strong just now. So maybe for the next time, what I should do is have a look at pitching across our teams compared to the rest of MLB, because I think the Tigers would come out fairly well. But run scored is poor. We had a situation in the last week where I think they went something like 20 innings without scoring a run, which is pretty unusual for a baseball team. Spencer Torkelson, number 1 pick, unless you're the White Sox, of course. Spencer Torkelson, number 1 pick a couple of years ago, hasn't really been firing. He's actually hit 3 home runs in about an 8-day period recently, but those were his first of the season. Tiger have now got Wenzel Perez sneaked above the 300 mark, and he's the only Tiger hitter to be doing that. Is it exciting to have somebody above 300? Probably not. I'm guessing if I supported one of the bigger, better teams, I'd be looking at several guys hitting that in the team as well. So a lot of frustration among the Tigers support that we're really just not, the bats aren't supporting good pitching. And indeed the bullpen is pretty impressive for the Tigers as well. And it was probably highlighted recently, a couple of run-outs from the bullpen saw them give up a couple of runs, and people say, the bullpen are losing us games now as well. But then the reality is they're not losing us games. It's the fact that nobody is scoring and nobody's getting us into a position to win games. So it's very much a situation that we're starting. We're pitching well, we're batting poorly, we're not winning games. We've gone very much from a situation and thought, this is a Tigers team that are in close games and they're managing to find a way to win. It's sort of the complete opposite now. We're not winning games at all now. So disappointing. Couple of series wins over the Diamondbacks and the Astros recently, and I think plenty of time in this podcast we'll be saying, that's impressive play. But yeah, we're sitting 23-24 as we record. So not disastrous, but maybe will hold my tongue a wee bit as to what my expectations are now for our trip to Chicago against the mighty White Sox in August. I suspect we're going to see two of the less strong teams in Major League Baseball. But do we really care about that? I'm sure we'll have a great time. But Richard, the Mariners, how's things at your end?
Yeah, no, Alan, I was thinking there when you're talking about, the kind of pitching being good, the bullpen being good, but the offense just not producing the runs. That was very much the story of the Mariners earlier this season as well, Alan. Yeah, that was very much what was happening with us. We were finding a way, like the Tigers, to win games. But certainly, I think last night, as we record, might have been what will turn out to be my favourite game of the whole season so far for the Mariners. We've done fairly well. We're still above 500, but we managed to beat the Yankees, which is always an achievement, beating them in the first game of a 4-game series, which is continuing this evening and with a doubleheader the following day. But not only did we beat the Yankees at home, which is always an achievement, but coming back from 4 runs to 1 down, right in the final innings there and out, and then just turning that around, incredible baseball. So, yeah, absolutely delighted. I would happily accept a split series with the Yankees. That would be great. But yeah, fantastic. I'm sure all Mariners fans loved that game last night.
Yeah, it was loved in Boston as well, I'm sure. But to do that in Yankee Stadium was incredible. I watched the game this morning, the condensed version, and it was absolutely fantastic. So well done. Because they're going, you have to give them the due, they're going pretty well out of it, to say the least. The Yankees looking dangerously hot. So in terms of the Boston, I'm going to concentrate. I'm going to kick off with the game last night because there's 2 very interesting incidents that happened last night. It's a tale of 2 Raffis. And the first one highlights a very interesting ruling that we've discussed in the past. The changes to what was known as the shift, which they did away with. The ruling required that you could no longer put the infielders where you wanted to. You had to have 4 infielders, 2 either side of second base. Well, what happened last night in an early play, our young shortstop, Sedan Rafael, is only 23. He's from a Caribbean island called Curacao, and it's a Dutch Caribbean island off the coast of Venezuela. Interestingly, there's another one. There's Aruba, and Xander Bogaerts, our previous shortstop, was from that island, and I think he played for the Netherlands baseball team. Anyway, I digress. So what happened was he's a brilliant young outfielder who's playing shortstop because of Trevor Story's injury. He's out for the season. Anyway, he made a great diving stop to a ground ball that had been hit between first and second base, and he threw out the batter at first. It was one of those bang plays, and it was reviewed. And I think the commentators, I didn't watch it in real time. It was a condensed version I saw this morning, but the commentators were speculating that there may have been a violation. So when it came to the umpire giving the review, he said that the out had been called correctly, but there had been a violation. And what had happened was that, and you could see when they showed it again, that Sedan Rafaela had been stood when the ball was being pitched immediately behind second base. So it moved over what he thought was to as far as he could. The scouting report on this hitter must have been where they were pitching. They were trying to get him to hit a ground ball to first base side. And that's probably how he managed to make that play. Otherwise it gets through. But the rule does say defensive teams will be required to have a minimum of 4 players on the field with at least 2 infielders completely either side second base. So the guy was, although he was thrown out, he was allowed to stay on first base because of the violation. So I thought it was interesting to see that new rule actually in play. And, it's when you get a ruling like that you sort of tend to understand it more. So not only are you required to have you must have 4 infielders. So you can't, as teams have done in the past, it seems to me as though you can no longer put an infielder out into the outfield to make a 4th outfielder like they used to do. In fact, I think, I might have even mentioned it before, I'm pretty sure back in the early days of baseball, a shortstop was a fourth outfielder, and eventually became short. That's why the numbering is slightly weird. Anyway, we're not going to that again. So the second Rafi, the original Rafael Devers, Rafi. Funnily enough, Dave and I had been talking about this on WhatsApp, messaging each other the other day, because previously he had hit a home run in his last 5 consecutive games, and that was equaling the franchise record. And we exchanged, can't remember how we got into that, but we exchanged information about that. And Dave said, quite rightly, I think it's a surprise it was actually that low, which got us to looking into it a bit further. There've been quite a few guys who have hit 5 home runs for the Red Sox in their long franchise, including, we haven't mentioned him this year with Ted Williams and another guy from a similar era, Jimmy Fox. And one of my favourites recently, he's out of favourite at the moment, Bobby Dahlbeck, did it in 2020. Dave O'Brien, the commentator for NESN, was talking about it. He's probably hoping it was going to happen. And I think it was in the top of the third, he hit another home run, which made the record, gave him the record outright for Boston Red Sox with consecutive games home runs. So he's now got 6. The actual all-time record for MLB stands at 8. I think there's 3 players in there. One of your guys, Ken Griffey Jr., owns that record. Can't remember who that is. Is it Don Mattingly? Is the guy? Can't remember who the other guy is. But anyway, fantastic achievement. And who knows? It's not a happy hunting ground for the Red Sox. The chop against the Rays. In fact, in the last 17 games against the Rays, the Red Sox have lost 14 out of 17, which is not great against anybody. But when it's your divisional rival, it's quite serious. And yeah, they haven't had such a good time recently. They're literally a 500 team at the moment, 24-24 record. But I think, considering the injuries they've had and the changes in personnel, it's a reasonable record. If the pitching continues at this level, it's still, I think their ERA is second only to the team who shall not be named. It's under 3. And, if that stays at that sort of level and Devers stays hot, Jaron Duran and some of the other younger players continue chipping in with the runs, I can see a winning season. Whether it's going to be enough for the playoffs, I don't know. You just want to be in contention around the trade deadline, and then maybe they'll, make a signing, or at least not be in a position where they might be selling players or trading players. So that's the Red Sox story from me.
Great, thanks for that, Dave. And yeah, it's still plenty of hope there, I think, for the Red Sox, but more than hope for the Philadelphia Phillies. I was just thinking about them. The London series is now just a few weeks away, and the Phillies have been on an incredible start to their MLB season. It'll be the hottest team, if they continue, it'll be the hottest team in baseball arriving in London for that series against the Mets as well. So are we surprised by how well the Phillies have done? I know we talked at the start of the season, some of the teams I thought were worth keeping an eye out on, and I don't remember, and apologies if I'm wrong, but I don't remember. Dave Jr., can you remember if the Phillies were one of the teams we thought might get off to a hot start?
I don't think they popped up for this year, Richard, but kind of thrown that wee curveball at me. I'm sure they made the World Series, not last year, but the year before. And something about that pops up that after the trade deadline from the All-Star game, so what would that have been, 2022, I think they made some really good trades, and they made some pretty good signings to move what was a decent team into being a really hot team. I can't remember, if I'm being honest, what happened to them last year, but it looks like they've found their feet again, and from all intents and purposes, they seem to just be a team that enjoy playing baseball. They've got a really good fan base from what I can see. Philadelphia, I don't know much about the area, but it's always struck me as a real sporting part of the States. A real crowd. I think quite a lot of Irish heritage as well there. So I know there's quite a big drinking culture for the Phillies. Again, it's not really a team that I've seen too much of or that I know much about, but I think sport in that part of the world is big. They're proud of their teams, and I'm sure the baseball team are really doing them well at present, so they will be a welcome addition to the pubs across in London, and next month, coming up pretty soon.
Absolutely, and yeah, Philadelphia, I think it's a tough town, but I think sports-wise, if you get your Philly fans behind you, they're behind you 110%, and they can carry you through. I know Alan and Yorkshire Dave have been well travelled across the United States. Have either of you guys been to Philadelphia? Has that been on your trips previous?
No, I've never made it there. Yeah, it's one of the, yeah. I think Dave's right. They have got a great sporting heritage, and maybe for us they've gone under the radar. I don't know whether that's true in America for sports. When you look at the personnel, is it Spenny Turnbull? Is he with them, Alan?
He is, yes. Yeah, I've not been either. I don't. It's probably a place that's not really featured on my initial radar, Richard. Which, when you consider their dish of cheesesteaks, which sounds incredibly tasty, I mean that's probably two of your favourite foods. Add in the fact that they enjoy drinking, you think, yeah, it's got to be a nice place to visit. I would have thought it's
probably shooting up our lists.
Yes, it's hitting a few things there as well, or the punching above their weight. Dave Jr., you're giving us the wee sign there.
Yeah, I was trying to work out, is Philadelphia where Rocky was filmed?
It was, yep, Philadelphia, absolutely. And quite amusing there, Alan, when you were about to say, because of, I actually foolishly thought you were going to talk about the rich history of Philadelphia and its Central Row and American independence and Liberty Bell. But you're a man like myself that knows what's important in life, so you went straight for the cheesesteak like I would have done as well. So I respect that. I respect that 100%. And I know our friend Campbell McLaren, that was his first team when he went to the United States as a young boy. And they landed, it was Philadelphia. They lived in it first. And I remember him telling us how that was the first MLB team he ever fell in love with before transferring his affections to the Bronx Bombers following that as well. But yeah, for all the reasons you mentioned, cheesesteaks, the occasional alcoholic refreshment, and a rich sporting heritage, it's maybe one we should put in our bucket list for the future.
The Philadelphia Bell, isn't it? That's the famous.
Yeah, they cracked the bell, innit? I think that's what they kind of ring that when they get a home run, don't they? Also got one of the, I don't know whether the cool is the right word, but I like the Philly fanatic, the mascot. He's got, I'm not going to even try and describe him, but and also one of my personal favourite players who I was sorry that we Boston Red Sox never kept hold of him. We had him for a season when we almost got to the World Series. Kyle Schwarber, who is doing his stuff back with the Phillies. So yeah, certainly. Well, we got a record out 700, is it something like that? It's just incredible, really. So
780. Did they not win the NFL, the Super Bowl, a couple of years ago as well?
I'm sure that's right as well, Alan. Yeah, and a real kind of sports mad town as well. So it'll be interesting to see if they can keep the momentum up. And certainly, as you say, look forward to their fans and Mets fans bringing a lot of colour to London when they arrive for that London series as well. And of course, MLB is very much still in the early stages of the season, a little over a quarter of the season gone now. But for those of us who follow football as well as baseball, who have room for many loves in their lives, the football season in the UK at least has just come to a close in recent weeks as well. There's an occasional cup final with certain teams involved still to come, but it's I thought it was a chance to look at some of the differences and similarities between baseball and football in terms of how the season's finished. So, for example, both of them have playoffs. And I know in baseball, playoffs have been a part of the scene for a long time, but football, they're, I think, slightly newer than they are in the baseball world. So do we like playoffs in either sport?
Yeah, I think one of the things that stands out for me as well is I'm I think I'm right in this, but Scottish football playoffs have one big distinction from the English playoffs in that we actually have the English playoffs, and we have mutual interest in the playoffs here because Sunday sees the conclusion of the Scottish Premiership playoffs and the English Championship playoffs. The English Championship playoffs are for all the teams in the Championship, and one of them can get to the Premiership, two having already got there. Leeds are obviously our interest in there. I've got a good white shirt on tonight as well, Dave, so I'll get that washed and pressed for Sunday afternoon. And then Ross County, obviously interested in, are already in the Scottish Premiership but are in the playoffs and can get relegated out of there. So that was the one thing that really struck me as quite different to American sport, where the playoffs is the goal, is the dream. And then I watched County's last couple of games. Not surprisingly, it's pretty much so many games I've watched this year have ended in glorious failure of a draw. They had their chances against Aberdeen when Aberdeen went down to 10 men, but a 90th minute goal against St Johnstone for St Johnstone denied them staying up and dropping them into playoffs. So the playoffs is not always something to be celebrated, but on the other hand, Leeds are playing what's termed one of the biggest games in football now as well. A one-off game to get back up to the Premiership, Dave.
Yeah, it gives teams a second chance, and I think it would be easy to be critical and say the top three should just go up. But, if you remember partly why this was brought in, it was to sort of get rid of a lot of what was termed as meaningless games. Remember when, the sort of the Championship was pretty much decided in European places, those relegated. So you would have 7 or 8 teams in the middle who had nothing really played for. Now, if you open it up to getting into the top 6, the season stays open longer. Having said that, the playoffs have been no friends to Leeds. If we get through this one on Sunday against Southampton at Wembley, it'll be 6th time lucky. We've been in the playoffs 5 times and never won. I was there for the first one in '87 when we got knocked out in the playoff of the playoffs. So I would have settled for a playoff chance at the start of the season. So let's go for it. Guns blazing on Sunday. Hope for the best.
Absolutely. And you'll certainly have the support of all the bullpen bros as well. Dave, I think we're all pulling for the Lily Whites to get that, to get up there. That would be a great result. But one thing that struck me as well, it's slightly different and to help out American listeners, is that the way it works in the Scottish League and I think in the English League as well, the very bottom team at the end of the season, the team with the worst record overall. So at the moment, and purely at the moment, Dave Jr., that would be the Chicago White Sox. And what would happen is that at the end of the season, they would play off. They would compete against the top team from the level below. And I guess in baseball, that would be AAA, although it's a bit different because the AAA teams are, representatives of the major league teams themselves. But hypothetically, the White Sox could be beaten by the AAA team of Seattle, for example, Tacoma, or whoever that might be. So that kind of gives maybe a hint as to how much would be at stake and how much is at stake for these teams. I know one of the things we love about baseball is the consistency. The teams are there, but I do wonder, and obviously new franchises happen. They have happened at numerous times over the years. But I wonder if every year there was the risk of a team, dropping out of the MLB altogether. But do we reckon that the owners would put up with such a thing? Or do you think there's just too much financial stuff at stake?
They're in probably the issue. They're also powerful and big organisations, aren't they? And if you look at dropping out of the Scottish League, Stranraer played East Kilbride Thistle from the Lowland League. Who's going to? I know Stranraer won, but who's going to stand up for Stranraer? And so I'd say, oh no, that's unfair. We're not going to let this organisation diminish. There's no financial value or whatever in there. So it's a fascinating chat, that one.
Now, everyone knows that in baseball, the World Series is the ultimate prize. That appearance in the Fall Classic and winning that best-of-7 series is what every baseball fan and every baseball player dreams of. But what if there could be not a second prize, but a different prize in baseball. Obviously, in a game where there's 160 odd games a season, there's not much spare room. But could there be enough room in America's pastime for a cup competition of some sort, a shorter, sharper competition in which new rules could be tried out? We've heard a lot about robo umpires. We've seen some fairly dodgy calls in recent games as well. There's been talk before about our baseball games simply too long. And I know the pitch clock has helped bring down average times, but what about shorter, sharper 6-inning games, for example? Could there be the chance to do what football does? And in football for many years, in English football, the Charity Shield has been a game between the league winners and the cup winners, with funds generated going to charities as well. So it's just a thought. It would be a revolutionary idea. But just if we're throwing around ideas, what do we think of that one?
Well, I think it is interesting, and they do on the quiet. Well, not on the quiet. It's quite a big thing. They do different things already, don't they? They have the All-Star break, which is a couple of days in a different city every year, midway through the season, and it's, as the name suggests, it's not regular teams competing against each other. It's the best players from the AL playing the best players from the NL. And, they're obviously taking regular games, season games to other countries, aren't they? They've got obviously MLB London, which we support. And I think you could see them maybe extending that to maybe a separate tournament, an overseas tournament, either in Europe or the Far East, or South America, or even Central America or Mexico, something like that. And so I think if there was enough, I don't want to be cynical about it, but if it was a big enough thing, enough money involved, properly organized, then I'm sure they would find a way to make it happen. And that it's a good idea about introducing the new ideas in laws of the game. They tend to do it now, don't they? In AA and AAA test, that's where they tested the time clock and various other things. But yeah, they could do that as part of the tournament. But yeah, I think it's a good idea. Send it in.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing there as well, and of Yorkshire Dave Street as well, is if you look at cricket has innovated with the 2020 and the 100 and stuff like that as well, where you are effectively playing shorter games. And I think the 2020 might have been, there's this league competition, so you're effectively running a couple of different leagues at the same time. But so I like your thinking, Richard, if they're going to do something, it's a chance to innovate. It is MLB the best sport for introducing a cup type knockout competition, because it's already 162 games. I'm a traditionalist, but can you shorten that? Can you find a way of fitting in so many games? American,
in a way, if you think about it, sort of there are already sort of three prizes, aren't there? You've got your divisional championship, which is the league, isn't it? I know it's only sort of 5, and that's not knockout. But when you go to the American League Championship and the National League Championship, that is playoff. That's knockout sport, isn't it? And and that is a big deal. If you win the American League Championship, then that's the sort of thing that clubs will put that flag on the pennant on the stand, won't they? That is important. Okay, well, they do say win it all, don't they? That's how they describe winning the World Series, and that's true. But the championship is a combination of league and cup, isn't it? So when you think about it, it's quite a good combination of everything, isn't it? But yeah, I think they would find a way of. They're never going to mess with the 162. I don't think.
No,
I think that's I think it's a traditionalist sport, isn't it? But they are open to new ideas, and especially if there's some cash in it for the owners, they would be well up for it.
I'm sure they'd be up for anything that fills their pockets a bit more fully. But think you're onto something. If anything was to happen, like some kind of tournament as opposed to just a series, then it would perhaps be the MLB London, MLB Paris, MLB Tokyo. Perhaps they'll find some way to turn those events into a self-contained, and in some ways, is that fairer than those games, counting towards the regular MLB season? Maybe so. I mean, we loved going to the London series, but the dimensions probably wouldn't have been permissible in a ballpark in America. So is it fair that a result in a ballpark whose dimensions aren't, don't meet the requirements or whatever should count just the same? Dave Jr.?
Just when the wording came up earlier, one of you mentioned 10 and 6s from a Scottish football point of view. Given that all 30 MLB teams have a real surplus of players in the single A, double A, triple A, is there something there to say for a tournament you have a 20-man squad, half of them need to be from your affiliate clubs?
Yeah.
And it just then showcases the next generation as well. It's whilst kind of spot checking it with you can perhaps use some pictures that are on the way back to recovery in AAA, or a couple of young guns or a couple of experienced pros. It's still representing the Red Sox, the Mariners, the Tigers, but it's under a slightly different guise where you take away the competitive element, where you're risking your top stars, because we all know injuries hit home these days, but you're giving these upstarts the chance to make a name for themselves without the real pressure of, shit, I'm at the show, I've got, I'm coming into pinch hit in the bottom of the ninth, I've got to make an impression. Whereas it's almost like a friendly atmosphere, but under the guise of your club.
There's an English Cup knockout competition, football this is, where the Premiership teams play their under 23 teams. Now, that's not the League Cup. It's obviously not the FA Cup. So is that like the equivalent of the Challenge Cup in Scotland?
I don't know. I mean, going back many years, there used to be the Reserve League, didn't they? Now it's not. It's sort of under 23s, but I do think there are. I'd have to check on that, but I have a feeling that sort of Liverpool or Man United's teams will be in the top tier, whereas the teams will be in the second tier. But I don't know about knockout tournament. Yeah,
but I love how we've developed these ideas just from a wee chat, and there's so many good thoughts in that in there.
Dave's idea of using AAA and AA players, I think that would get some legs in the. Certainly it would be a great way of giving. I mean, it is competitive enough anyway. I think AAA especially. It's one step away from the show, isn't it? And it's almost at that level. But if you had something to win at the end of that tournament, it involved players who were on the verge of making it into MLB. I think that's a terrific idea. I'm hoping they're listening. Like, who's the commissioner just now? Is it still, what's his name? Never forget, what's his name?
Well, no, I hope that we should maybe trademark a few of these ideas first. I'll throw in one final one that builds upon Dave Jr.'s idea about the kind of AAA element of it and the showcasing that next generation. That rather than some cup, some metal trinket, could the prize, to make it meaningful, be an additional draft pick?
Yeah, that means quite a lot, doesn't it?
Because that could potentially be you getting your hands on a future superstar. So it would give you a very real motivation for teams to take that seriously and to do their best. And it also ties in, if it's the young generation almost competing and highlighting their own skills as part of that, then it would make sense to have a chance to have another young starlet joining the franchise.
I think that would get a lot of support, Richard. That definitely, great ideas. Again, it's Commissioner Manfred. I hope you're listening.
Yeah,
there's loads of good ideas coming out of the Highland Bullpen tonight.
I can't believe we are open one of our regulars, but yeah.
And we are open to travelling over to explain them in greater detail to all the MLB cities. We could perhaps do a wee tour. That would be ideal.
All expenses paid, of course.
Great, yeah, it's all fantastic stuff. A lot of good thoughts and ideas in there, and that, yeah, it's just come from our experience of football, where we're heading into Cup final weekend as well. But obviously, it's the showcase occasion of Scottish and English football. We've got two big derbies in both the games, but obviously the big trophy has already been decided in the league championship as well. So that's maybe something that people who don't follow European football don't quite see. But one of the other things as well, and here's the draft picks. Oh, excuse me. Draft picks is interesting from Richard, because obviously they're generally getting awarded on the basis of finishing at the bottom, whereas the other not quite draft picks that we hand out are European places. So finishing in a certain position in the league this year then takes you into a higher echelon of European football to then play as well. So yeah, it's good stuff. Really enjoyed catching up with all the guys tonight. Another episode of the Highland Bullpen. We've talked through the woes or not woes of our various teams. We've had some historical stats come through again as well, which happens pretty much every week. And we're sending a strong message to Mr. Manfred about how he really needs to go and change the face of Major League Baseball, adding in some great ideas, and we're the guys here to help him. So thanks for listening, folks, and we'll catch up soon.